You're searching for something whole, cause what you seek's real life. You're watching this world unfold, the truth beneath the lies. Rekindling what's been stole, the need to free one's mind. Uncover the truth exposed, so people see the light. Let's chant it down so we can know. It's simple, we just break it down to little bits so we can process all. Make the switch to elevate yourself to conscious mode. And it's beneficial, we can get this concept rolling. Get the future generations who wanna stop the whole thing. With the message demonstrating, we can start opposing. Taking in, assimilating, getting lots of knowledge. Waking up the population, trying to stop hypnosis.
Chant it down, radio's coming to you live from the Hawaiian Islands. Coming from the perspective of complete freedom. Coming from wisdom outside the system and then some. This is the mouthpiece of the natural earth forgotten. At this point in time, humanity's been kept from the truth, so Chant It Down Radio offers the coordinates to a path out.
You're searching for something whole, cause what you seek's real life. You're watching this world unfold, the truth beneath the lies. Rekindling what's been stole, the need to free one's mind. Uncover the truth exposed, so people see the light. Let's chant it down so we can know. It's simple, we just break it down a little bit so we can process all. Make the switch to elevate yourself to conscious mode. And it's beneficial, we can get this concept rolling. Get the future generations wanna stop the whole thing. With the message demonstrated, we can start a post. Taking in, assimilating, getting lots of knowledge. Waking up the population, try to stop hypnosis.
In 2008, I bumped into an insider who told me, he invited me over for afternoon tea, and he was the son of a CIA contracted scientist, and he told me all about the different spray programs, and I didn't even know the CIA had scientists, so I just was that oblivious, right? I mean, I knew about all this stuff for a long time, but the one he told me the most about was the nanotechnology inside our bodies, the Morgellons, and he explained that when we are around technology, it makes this network of wires grow in our bodies, along with poor diet, genetically modified foods, and things like that. And he said when they turn things on, turn things up, like HARP or ionospheric heaters, we'll be more connected to these in a more of a trance from the frequency. And he talked about these wires forming antennas in our bodies up our spine and into our heads. So this was in 2008, and Wi-Fi had only been around a little while. He talked about the digital switchover as a key component to this grid and connectivity to everything. And he had no idea of 5G at the time or the Internet of Things, at least I don't think. But he did say that out of all the spray programs, that the Morgellons were the crown jewel of their operations. This was like a really important piece. And he did talk about the connectivity of things like HARP posting into smaller antennas like wind towers, cell towers, which in turn connect to our phones, the Wi-Fi, your smart meter, all those things. Now, all of this makes so much sense, and this is like the means to an end in a way, the Internet of Things, to merge man with machine. So I wanted to get your take, Max Igan, because you have a video up about us being modified for the smart grid system, and let's start with you on this, and if anyone wants to chime in after that, let's just flesh this whole thing out.
Yeah, well, when you look at all this, I mean, the whole 5G grid, I mean, it's going to do a lot of damage, health-wise, just by being there. It'll be like we're all living inside a microwave scanner, so you're going to see all sorts of health defects happen, which they'll cover up. Like there'll be vitamin D defects, and I'll say that's because of this or whatever, and they'll bring in some new supplement for you, whatever, so there'll be all that sort of stuff. But there's been a lot of disinformation with this, where a lot of people think as soon as 5G comes online, we're all going to get fried. 5G is needed for the speed to get all this happening, but it's like you say, it's all the little devices and what the things they're putting out, the frequencies they're putting out, what your microwave oven's putting out, what the airport scanners are putting out. 5G is needed so that everything can be connected in real time. You need that type of bandwidth to run anything as big as the Internet of Things, especially if people are hooked up to it as well. But when you look at all this, I mean, you look at the airport scanners and things, all of these things break our DNA, and you've got to ask why. what is the purpose of breaking our DNA strand? Well, what would you do this for? And when you look at things like Morgellon, well, if they were going to introduce a new strand of DNA, and with the quantum computers and things that they're building now, these are all based on 3-strand DNA. And so what's this all about? Well, if they were going to introduce a third strand into us, wouldn't they need to break our DNA in certain points to create points for the third strand to bond onto? And is that possibly what Morgellons is, a third strand of DNA that's being introduced into our system? And because it's made of nanotech, is it not possible then for this to probably carry a carrier wave to hook us up to the quantum computer or whatever they want to do for us? I mean, there's all sorts of possibilities where they could go with this, but there's no doubt that everybody has Morgellons fibers in their body. I mean, you can take saliva or blood or flesh from anybody and you can culture Morgellons virtually out of anybody in a petri dish. And those that are distributing symptoms of Morgellons seem to be like those who are rejecting the fibers, but most of us aren't. Most of us are assimilating these fibers. So, with this whole Internet of Things and what they're doing, I mean, there's so much more to it. When you look at the whole concept of social crediting and digital currency, and I've talked about this ad nauseum on radio shows recently, how they can limit your purchasing power. Once they've got us all hooked up to a mainframe and they're identifying us by our DNA and that becomes our password, how are they able to manipulate us in other ways? So it's all very, very speculative at the moment, trying to figure out exactly what they're doing. But all the research seems to indicate that what they're doing is introducing a third strand of DNA to us and somehow hooking us up to this Internet of Things ourselves, whether we want us to be hooked up or not.
Can I chime in just for a minute? This is Matt here, Matt Landman. So what I see for the interconnection of the geoengineering and the 5G is the blood-brain permeability. They're trying to get away with getting these nanoparticulate metallics in our brain, and that's a challenge, right? Not everybody is fluoridated. Fluoride helps take that. It escorts the nanoparticulates past the blood-brain barrier, but the aluminum itself, it can't pass your blood-brain barrier as easy. So if you're eliminating fluoride from your diet and you're chelating, you might not be even subject to as much nanobots as they want. So they're trying to figure out a way to get that right in your brain. But if you increase blood-brain permeability by increasing the 5G radiation, then, they work hand in hand just like all the other agendas. What do you think, Ellana?
Well, the way I look at it is that the 5G is a linchpin, as you're all indicating, in that they'll be able to stack various frequencies on the pulses that's coming through the 5G that will be consistent 24/7, and that those will resonate with the nanobots that are already in our bodies and our beyond our blood-brain barrier. This is a surefire way, and that's why I call it a linchpin in the book. This is a surefire way that they're going to be able to control whole swaths of the population. They'll do it through the IoT in everybody's house, and sometimes what I wonder is, was the smart meter sort of not a Trojan horse exactly, but a first volley.
It was a test run.
To see what the public reaction would be and see what the problems were, when really, all in all, the 5G was the main actor on the stage. And I was surprised when I was researching and getting ready to write a part on 5G. I was surprised to see that that it was really all the way back in 2013. That they started out with what's called the Etherhall 600T small cell backhaul system, and they were putting up small cells at street level on telephone poles already that were 57 gigs to 66. And as you know, the 5G is actually 30 gigs, which is billions, 30 gigs to 300 gigs. And so it was already claiming that V-band spectrum. That's 2013. So I was fascinated to see that, when they break something out, you think, okay, they've finally succeeded. No, this has been in the hopper for years to do this. And what I always try to point to people is that the fact that our atmosphere is now ionized is pivotal for all this technology in how it's coming out at a lightning pace, and they all seem to have all their I's dotted and their T's crossed because they've been waiting for this for decades, and that's why I think that the 5G will be the linchpin. The scariest thought to me, folks, is that they're going to be able to manipulate these nanobots in our bodies, in our brains, remotely by the 5G. They will be able to peer into, either the hive mind, the swarm mind, whatever they want to do. This will be the key, because this millimeter wave is not just another generation like 4G, 3G. This is a very different creature. This is a creature very much like what's called the tetra signal in UK that Barry Trower talks about. The police department there is all deeply entrenched in. And Max, I hope when you go to Britain to give your talk that you might be able to hear more about this tetra system that's based on terahertz.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to know about it. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that's what the 5G will be able to do, and that's why they need something like 5G to carry such an incredible amount of bandwidth. I mean, you think if you've got everybody hooked up to this, and you've got every appliance and every plant water into a pill bottle, as they say, hooked up to this, you need an enormous amount of bandwidth to pull it off. Yeah. But also, it's an active denial system as well. So they could easily use this to cordon off certain areas. They could use it to create active denial zones. I mean, the possibilities of this are absolutely endless. And where we're heading to with this whole thing, I mean, they'll be able to monitor every single thing everybody does. It'll curtail human freedom and human expression to a point that is beyond Orwellian. And, you won't have anybody be able to think outside the box at all. And if they do, they'll get discarded. And 5G will be able to do that. And that's where we're heading, and people really need to pay attention to what's going on. I think that's why they've escalated so much theatre of conflict and all this rubbish that we're seeing in the Middle East and everywhere at the moment, just to keep people distracted from what's happening right beneath their feet.
I also think that one of the parts that I mentioned earlier that we're being sent in variety of directions about the information of the rollout of 5G. I also think that it's possibly true. I was reading some thoughts by a guy who is working with Tony Pantalaresco in a variety, looking at the variety of health remedies that people can take. Those who are in active Morgellons, or those who are in passive Morgellons, where it's just inside waiting to happen. This fellow had the idea that the 5G is really already here in the cell phone. You can tell because the iPhone addiction that is happening among, particularly I see it with the young people with their heads down and all that. I don't own an iPhone, but they are actually, the millimeter wave is already there, and they're already being programmed. Oh, yeah. And I tend to think that's true. I mean, we keep hearing about this rollout. Well, yeah, maybe on a neighborhood basis, and they've promised the rural, though I find it hard to believe they'll be able to do the rural given the distance factor that the millimeter wave can do. But I do feel that certainly Elon Musk's thousands of mini satellites up there, the CubeSats, is going to be the other part of that for the rural rollout. But at the same time, I think it's already here. I think that many of us are already dealing with the 5G through the cell phones.
Due to mass censorship, if you want to listen to this entire podcast, go to any podcast player out there and visit the website chanitdownradio.com, which has many episodes and archives to sift through.